Hello there. I will be taking a look at Monster Hunter Rise, which is a game made by Capcom, a studio that brought you Asura, Sword, Dark Void, the Monster Hunter franchise. Rise is a Nintendo Switch port that was made in the times of coronavirus and the severe data breach that occurred at Capcom during its production time. I got a small number of hours in this game and I decided to review it because the last update for the game dropped. You can comfortably get through the game in 80 to 90 hours. Anyway, this game can be confusing and overwhelming because it's throwing systems after systems and mechanics onto a player. So if you are a newcomer to the franchise, it might overwhelm you. When you start playing the game, it's going to take you a little time to acclimate towards it until you finally find something that clicks with you. It can range from story to its pet systems to finding a weapon that you really like using. Personally, for me, it was the combat that drew me in and kept me there. Interaction between the system and how they perform against a monster that I'm fighting. If you enjoy 3D action RPGs, this is probably a game worth checking out. On to character creation. You create your character, your cat and your dog. These are your combat support animals. This is a Japanese game, and Japanese developers and or publishers think that the animals slap. Narrative is not the main focus of the game. I just wanted to get that out of the way. You wake up in a Japanese styled village named Kamura. You talk to the guy in charge and he tells you that there is a rampage incoming and you're somehow selected to deal with it. This is a mission structure game. You will go to different locations in order to deal with the targets or a target of said mission. I mentioned locations. That is because there is 7 of them total in the game. However, you can only access 5 if you only have the base game. And they are each detailed and peppered with different materials, consumables, endemic life, and collectibles, which will now lead into traversal system and other miscellaneous stuff that you can find on the map. There's 4 ways of traversing the map. Firebugs that enables you to aim and grapple into thin air into any direction that you want. After executing a said move, you can hang in midair from your firebug, from which you can further extend the cover distance in any direction you choose except up. And you can also drop down. It feels like no obstacle is big enough if you combine it with the wall running, which requires stamina. And overall it feels great and responsive to use. Palamute riding. You mount your dog and turn it into a race car. You can initiate a drift after you start sprinting with it. That, once over, will give you a huge speed boost. You can also jump onto smaller walls and over smaller obstacles. It can be a bit wonky sometimes, but usually it works 99% of the time. Fast travel, yeah, just fast traveling with an added option that once you get to camp, you can enter your tent to eat and restock, which will also sharpen your weapon. And great firebugs. These are just a button prompt that will yeet you over terrain that takes a while to scale or is tricky to navigate. What's worth noting is that you're not that much slower if you're competing with the guy that's riding a race dog. Combined with fast travel, they work really great together, letting you fight the monster rather quickly. Traversal is overall a nice change from the previous game or games. In the base game, I get the feeling that they don't want you to go slow, and collect materials and stuff. And it kind of feels like it's because the palamute is just way too fast. Going fast will make you miss out on spirit birds, endemic life, and some materials. I am fully aware it's a choice you have to make as a player. I just like having my cake and eating it too. I mentioned spirit birds, so what are they? They're basically a looming menace. Your true max HP and stamina are not accessible if you don't collect them. They also buff your attack and defense. They give off an impression that they are there to make you feel like you lack more stats. I personally completely ignored them, unless the monster was sending me back to camp. The maximum buffs you can get are tied to your battle ace, and those are just there for this mechanic. Kind of disappointing. I expected more from them. They feel like they're there to make you explore the map, which is fine, but they also feel very tedious once you explore the map. Onto endemic life. You can find a creature on the map that will usually inflict an elemental bite or a status effect on the monster, which will make you have an easier time fighting it. Worth mentioning is that you don't need to bother with spirit birds in Sunbreak, because there is a skill that will spawn them on top of you. This skill is available as a dango skill and as an armor skill. However, you might still want some endemic helpers. And now I address graphics. Honestly, I have no idea how to assess this part of the game. You either like it or don't, because it has the stylized art style. I get the impression some colors are a bit muted, but that's just my personal taste. I know it's a Nintendo Switch port and that Capcom had issues when making it amidst the coronavirus and the data breach while building a new engine for the game. But they could have at least made the environments a bit more colorful. I personally don't mind that much, but I can see why it would turn someone away. I also wish to address the flooded forest, which is, as the name says, a very muddy looking map. It's not my cup of tea. Let's talk about the meat of the game, the monsters. There's a ton of them, and they range from small to can't fit on your screen. They all have an intro sequence introducing their looks and abilities, split into two categories, large and small monsters. Small monsters are there to sabotage you and provide materials. Big ones you interact with in the form of quests. These are effectively the boss fights, and each new one will unlock something new. They have so much character in their design that you might peg one of them as a most hated thing in this game, and that whoever designed it can choke on a chem-injected cucumber. Or you might pin one of them as your favorite one to interact with and fight with. Now, the game is called Monster Hunter, and while you can play it as a monster fighter, it will heavily encourage you to tip the odds in your favor with many different tools of your own, such as flash bombs, sonic bombs, traps, and so on, and endemic life that you can find on the map. The monsters are unspeakable and fantastical creatures that usually feel good to fight. Sometimes, however, some of them just feel annoying or unfair. There's also the parts that are under the hood. Each monster has different weak spots for 3 different categories of damage: bladed, blunt, and projectile, which also have another set of weakness in the form of elements, and those are going to be used to be breaking the monster's parts, which will make the fight significantly easier. The most obvious and easiest example would be cutting off a monster's tail, so its tail swipes have less range and damage. Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. Also, if you want to deep dive min-max the damage and status elements, there's a ton of information and math formulas. If that is your cup of tea, it is not required, but you know that it's a deep system if a part of the community is snorting spreadsheet paper because of 10% more damage increase. Big props to developers, including the monster weaknesses in the game this time, opposed to having to look it up on a random Wikipedia site. Hello there, Hunter. Do you need a weapon? There's 14 different weapons, and I highly recommend you don't play the bow. Jokes aside, I think they're better experienced and understood on your own. I recommend you don't play any ranged weapons once you start out. However, if you really want to, just make sure to find a video that explains them, because they can be overcomplicated and confusing. During one of the hunts, you might get inflicted with one of the next few minor inconveniences, and they can range from on fire, lubricated, convulsing in the dirt, having a concussion, and to taking an involuntary nap, and others. Now, the phrase start quote, "I do not wish to be put to sleep by a giant lizard mummy," end quote, might make me sound like a degenerate, but I am pretty sure no one wants to find themselves flung into that scenario. Luckily, the game gives you options to counter anything the monster can throw at you, except maybe two things, none of which are too difficult to deal with. So every armor gives you defense by default, and some resistances to one or a few of the elements. What sets them apart, however, are skills, and these apply globally to your character. They range from standard stuff like you can crit, your crits will do more damage, you will hit harder, to defensive ones, giving you exciting, visceral skills like more defense and immunity to status stuff. Basically, paralyze, sleep, stun, poison, resistance. And then there are more progressively insane ones like Bubbly Dance, which will make you slide all over the place if you dodge one too many times, but in turn it will buff your evading prowess. That is just one of many. I recommend you kind of experiment with them so that you at least figure out which ones will make you using your weapons better and more enjoyable. I'll list a few examples. Say a longsword, a quick sheet level 3 makes it a decent quality of life improvement. Dual blades, stamina surge, and constitution. Great sword. Focus, yeah, it makes you charge your swings faster. That is one of the many examples, and you can mix and match from the very start of the game. In fact, it's recommended so that you can get used to spending time in the menu making your next build that will work with your playstyle. Now, each star rank will introduce a stronger monster and a higher difficulty spike. The game expects you to play with its skill system to overcome the obstacles in front of you. To dive into this system even further is entirely dependent on how you play the game. If you like damage, there is min-maxed builds out there, assuming that you will play perfectly and not get hit. Meta builds are in fact meta speedrun builds, and they should be treated as such. I highly recommend experimenting with parts of them, because they can broaden your playstyle and your understanding of the skill system. If you happen to be looking up a meta build, you need to approach it how you approach fighting the monster. You need to ask yourself how confidently can you handle it, and then plan accordingly. There's also builds like Mushroom Answer, the Friendship, the Breaking Monster part build, the Coal Miner build, the good stuff. I mean, pick and choose. Eventually, you'll progress into unlocking armor slots and decorations. Those are a great way to further customize your build. They're a bit annoying to get regarding some of the rare monster parts, but I had no trouble with RNG most of the time. And decoration materials drop fairly often. I kind of recommend and don't recommend you try rampages. So I am personally biased against them, but I can see how someone can enjoy them. So if you wanna play a tower defense game, I recommend you try rampages. If you don't wanna do that, just skip them. Molding. You recycle trash monster materials that you don't need and will not use, for a chance that you might get something potentially useful in return. It's nice to have, but don't expect anything too useful. Combat. Difficulty is modular because there is so many ways of choosing the monster. A Dark Souls role, because during a weapon attack, and I mean almost its full animation, you will be locked into it and won't be able to dodge out of it. This helps add the feeling of weight to even the lightest of weapons like sword and shield and dual blades, or your actions having consequences, whichever one you choose. The weapons in a practical sense are pretty simple. They have a low entry point but a high skill ceiling that will keep you playing for a long while if you're trying to master a weapon. Except dual blades, they just have an entry point. Notice I said high skill ceiling? Yes, that is because most of the monsters are bringing their own spin on how and when you hit. It's a nice little samba dance that only ends when one of you is dead. On through low rank, you will think I'm a crazy person, but more stars equals more scars. More you go up the ranks, more disturbing fauna you will meet. The wirebugs are the main character of this entry in the series. The new spin on Capcom's Monster Hunter combat formula. And like any new spin on something, it has flaws and advantages. I will address the flaws in a minute or two. While they don't bring much to the game except reversal and getting you off the ground in the beginning, that all changes once you unlock switch skills. Suddenly, they tie to your weapon mechanics. They're used for silk-bind attacks, which either buff the advantage your weapon gives you or nerf the weakness or the trade-off the weapon has. They're an interesting new addition to the game visually and mechanically. They also add some depth in the decision-making process. You have to plan and have one in reserve if you're struggling against the monsters, so in case you end up on the floor, the monster can't finish you off with a follow-up attack. Or you don't. It's entirely dependent on how hard you are styling on your chosen poaching victim. It feels very satisfying when you are stuck in the loop of dodging the monster's attacks and using your weapon's attacks or shield to dodge and block while dishing out the punishment. There is a certain zen state when you hunt a monster so many times you internalize its stealth and you know what it's gonna do before it even does it. That's the pace of the combat being at its most enjoyable and engaging. Would be a shame if there was a mechanic to interrupt it now, wouldn't it? Wyvern riding, we have mounting at home. Yeah, you hit the monster, you mount it. You have two options. You smack it into walls or you smack it into another monster, which always ends up in the monster toppling over. However, if you smack it into another monster, you can mount the ecological abomination and use it to beat the shit out of your primary target. it's not that fun after a while, and it breaks the pace of the combat. It sucks that it's such free damage. You're kind of making your time in the game harder if you don't use it. Wirefall. Wirefall and Wire Dash actually available in a hunt is just insane to me. It's a game about positioning and timing. So too much mobility doesn't make you feel any consequences or tension from the monster. But yeah, it's easy to be negative about anything that you put 400 hours in. I mean, just look at MMO players, they're always unhappy. And I put in so many hours that there's certainly some gripes with the combat. But it was like 60% fun, 20% AFK and 20% meh. Which is kind of what I personally got out of the game. Story. Rise story is serviceable. I'm fully aware it's nothing special, yet I somehow ended up enjoying it to the point I even read all the text boxes and hunted down all the relics. You also develop an interest in it. Here's a few tips. There is a cat in your room that will share gossip with you. I'm not showing it. Find it on your own. And you can also hunt down the relics on the maps that I just mentioned for extra lore. Sunbreak. This is where it actually gets good, because it seems that for the DLC they actually put effort into crafting and making the story. It introduces an actual working rival monster. It also greatly improves on the presentation, while it removes reading every single dialog box as a mandatory requirement to understand what the fuck is going on, by showing it in the cutscenes. Having said that, there is not much wrong with the narrative, because it accomplishes what it sets out to do, which is getting some new drip after a poaching session. And yeah, anyways, spoilers. The urgent quests after Geismagorum don't bring any other story details, mostly. However, once you get to Amatsu, it steps it up to 11 with a sudden wrap up to the Kamura's Princess side story. It's very well done, even if the fight sucks a little bit. And then we got the cream on top, Primordial Malzeno. God dang, does this fight slap. I'd say this is the best fight in Sunbreak, together with the best cutscene, just the whole package in general. It also feels like it wraps up the canonical story of Elgato, so that's kind of nice to have, I guess. And now, Endgame. Sadly, every time there is a DLC for a Monster Hunter game, the previous endgame gets kind of obsolete. So, while I did say endgame, what I meant is post-story content in Sunbreak. I mean, don't blame me, blame the devs for that. So, depending on how fast you wish to go through it, it's either going to be a soul-crushing grind or an enjoyable activity. The endgame introduces 3 new systems, more melding options, and new decorations. One of the 3 systems, Anomaly Investigations, will give you afflicted materials, anomaly tickets, anomaly coins, and some type of amber essence. The higher the investigation level, the rarer the afflicted materials are. This also makes amber essences more plentiful and of better quality. It's a pretty interesting system. The monster gets more HP, some of its moves are sped up, and they get some new moves as well. Or at least that's the feeling I had, because maybe I didn't fight everything in mastering when I was going through it again. To counteract the HP buff they gave to the monster, they gave it 2 mechanics. First one triggers when the monster hits you with a physical attack. He inflicts a debuff on you that's called Blood White, which basically nerfs your healing, but in exchange for that, you will heal by hitting the monster. The second mechanic, the creature gets some tumors of blood essence that can be popped with your weapon for extra damage and the chance to topple it and get it out of the enraged state if you detonate all of them. Anomaly investigations is the mats you will be using for new decorations and your melding options. So basically, each new afflicted material you get, you will unlock a new decoration, and well, that's it. And melding is just using any afflicted material to get more charms. So curio weapon crafting is why you need those progressive rare mats. This will open up your weapon to attack, elemental, affinity, sharpness, and rampage slot upgrades. It adds some extra damage, element and sharpness depending on which level of the anomaly slots you unlock. It's nothing too major, like yeah, you don't need to worry about it. Curio armor crafting. This is what you will be using the amber essences for. As long as you are doing anomaly investigations, you won't run out of materials for augmentations. Augmentations is a mechanic that will unlock at anomaly investigation level 10, 80, and 120. The first type you unlock, I'll call it standard. These are pure RNG, you can roll something insane on them if you are lucky. That's pretty much it. The second type will be stability augmentation. This type will prioritize upgrading your defense and elemental resistances on your armor piece. The third type is augmentation skill plus. Well, it does say skill plus. It will likely give you a negative skill on your armor. Not to worry though, in return, it's going to give you a rare skill, if you're lucky. I'm not sure how the rolls exactly work. I'm not gonna dig around too much, but it's worth mentioning that if you ever get this far, that they will be a great supplement to your build or builds. Whether you go defense, damage, or support, it will greatly lighten the load on your talismans or armors. You can also roll skills that are out of your reach. I think I rolled the skill around MR 130 that unlocks on an armor set on 140. Now, while you're doing anomaly investigations, you might notice that your MR rank is climbing higher, which will also in turn unlock the new origin quests, just like the other ones, like the ones that I talked about in spoilers. These, however, won't contribute much to the story. However, what they will contribute in is expanding your arsenal. New decorations, new armors, new weapons, new skills. The first new monster in master rank that you will unlock is unlocked at MR20. The last one is at MR80. To note that there is a seriously high difficulty spike from MR20 to MR180, and then further on depending on if you want to do maxed out anomalies. Now, if you like what you heard so far and wanna take the game for a spin, I recommend you try the demo. If you're a Monster Hunter veteran or you just wanna get an impression on how the game will feel, it's free, so you know. Now let's talk about buying the game and the DLC. Yeah, I'm mentioning the DLC on purpose. Now, how come Sunbreak is more expensive than Rise? Is it because it has triple or maybe even quadruple the amount of content? Yeah, I'm not defending it. I feel that's kind of scummy. However, if you do want to buy them, you can snipe both of them from key sites or Steam sales if you want to own them. Because fuck giving Capcom 68 euros / dollars when you can have them both for 40 more or less. Or you can just go outside and rent them from shady torrent sites. I will not give any rating because I think you should make your own decision, but I will give a recommendation. I recommend you get it while it's on sale. I don't know why I decided to pick this game as my first project. However, it has been a monumental disaster. All of the good recordings I could have gotten my hands on are stuck on Kick at 2.5k bitrate. This is not me complaining, this is me trying to say I'm sorry. If anyone watches this video, I thank you for watching.
Bye.